Hello, hello. I'm starting it up a little early, but I'm not going to totally begin until I see a couple people here, but not going to do one of those things where it's like waiting around forever for people to join. So, anyway, but since I am on here like 11, 12 minutes before the start date, I'm backwards. What I have is a bunch of questions that I've received in the past about past life regression, and then hopefully people will send me some questions. So that would be nice. Anyway, I don't know if you guys have read any books by Dolores Cannon, but when I was first introduced to Dolores Cannon, it was through her books, and I found her Convoluted Universe books in the Barnes and Noble, Union Square, New York. Now I'm in Hollywood. But when I started reading those books, what happened was I was in this phase of I don't want to learn any more healing techniques. I want to focus on doing my own seminars. I don't want to learn other people's. Hi, Melissa. I don't want to learn other people's methods. I want to start teaching my own stuff. But then when I started reading Dolores Cannon's Convoluted Universe series, it changed everything. And I said, looks like I got another method I need to learn. And it was funny because at the time, my girlfriend at the time said, I think you have one more method to learn. And I was like, no, I don't want to. But when I started reading Dolores Cannon's Convoluted Universe series, which I basically inhaled, and then read all of her other books, it blew my mind so much. It was like, I need to do this. This is so cool. And so that's what I did. I started in 2010, and I took the first seminar. I was living in New York, and I decided I can't wait 6 months till she does a seminar in the East Coast. I think that's how long it would have taken. And so I flew out here to Burbank to do my level 1 class. And immediately after that, I went back to New York and I started working with clients. And immediately I was getting the same kinds of results, the same kind of sessions that Dolores Cannon had in her books. So that was really exciting. And, I had read all the other Michael Newton, Brian Weiss, other things. I'd read other things about past life regression, other methods. They are mind-bending. Yeah, Dolores Cannon would always talk about how her books would blow people's minds. And I would always, for me, I've been into this stuff for a long time, and I've had my psychedelic experiences, so it takes a lot to blow my mind. I mean, for example, like aliens. To some people, you start talking about aliens and they think that's the weirdest thing in the world. Like, it's crazy. Well, that is the programming the government has tried to instill that immediately when you talk about aliens or paranormal, the word that comes up is crazy. This is programming. This is something to keep us away from wondering about this stuff. You know, there's always been a struggle between spirituality and religion. Spirituality is living spirit. It's participating with spirit. It's bringing the energy of spirit into the physical. Religion, on the other hand, is what people do when they're trying to codify spirit into a system, but it's not spirit. It's a system. It's a system pointing supposedly in the direction of spirit, but it's not necessarily participating. So I'm going to wait to get on with questions until I'm at 9 o'clock. We're still 5 minutes early. So it's really weird because when I'm looking in this screen of myself, it's backwards. So, which means I guess that's the way I really look. Okay. I guess I got to deal with that. Anyway, but yeah, what I always explain to people is that every kind of healing method or hypnosis method or anything like that, it kind of carries the imprint of the founder. And it also carries the ability of the founder to go there or the inability to go there, right? Like Dolores Cannon was open to all information pretty much, even though it did blow her mind a lot, and she would always talk about that. But she would put it in there where I can imagine other people doing past life regression. It might be that they don't get clients talking about these things like alien past lives or ancient civilizations, things like that. But it also might be that they, that energetically it just doesn't come to them, or they just edit it out. They don't put it in there. That could be the case too. I don't know. What I do know is that Dolores Cannon's endless curiosity resulted in her coming up with some wild stuff. And one of the wildest things is her 3-part series, 3-volume series, Conversations with Nostradamus. Well, Melissa, it's Dolores Cannon would argue with you there, excuse me, about her performing miracles. Dolores always said, I'm not a healer, I'm not a psychic, I'm not a channeler, and all of that. And it's the higher self. It's what she called subconscious. Excuse me. That provides the healing. So I'm an energy healer, and I do energy healing all the time, as much as I do past life regression. I don't ever make medical claims because that'll get you in trouble. But I've had dramatic physical healings happen. So one thing, Melissa, is this: I don't really promote or advertise myself as somebody who does physical healing. I talk about physical healing as kind of a side effect of what I do. Now the fact is physical healing happens all the time. I haven't had people come in dying of cancer and walk out cancer free. No, I haven't had that. But I've had a lot of things. Okay, Melissa, excuse me, got to heal my cough first. So about physical healing, again, number one, it's the higher self that does the physical healing in QHHT. It is not the practitioner. The practitioner just asks the higher self. Oh, that's what you mean by they, the higher self, right? The way the subconscious. The practitioner just guides the higher self to do the healing. And what's funny is a lot of times the higher self kind of gives a little resistance, and it's kind of like you got to go through this dance of talking it into doing healing. So, I mean, I've seen people be healed in my practice of many different physical issues, absolutely. But my dad's a doctor. I know the risk of kind of promising medical cures. That'll get you in trouble. And I'm not looking for that kind of trouble. So the way I phrase it basically is that I think that when you heal certain issues, emotional healing follows. Okay. The idea is that, well, like what Dolores Cannon used to say, is that the physical illness, the physical disease is the last stop in a process that has gone quite a while. Okay. So what happens is, let's say you have a negative belief, and that negative belief, if it's not checked, ends up becoming a negative emotion. And those usually happen fairly simultaneously. But the more you entertain the negative belief, the more you have the negative emotion. And the more the negative emotion goes on, the more it actually starts becoming a physical issue. You can look at for example, the acupuncture system, the 5-element system of Chinese medicine, where, for example, really simplifying things, the lungs hold grief, and the heart holds heartbreak, and the liver holds anger, bladder and kidneys hold fear. Okay, so what happens is, let's say fear. You hold on to fear, you don't clear your fear issues. You have false negative beliefs that are fear-based. And then what happens is that you move on to a kind of emotional state where you're stuck in the fear. And over time, that impacts kidneys or bladder. A lot of times, kidneys first. And so then you end up with a kidney issue. And then the medical establishment looks at that as purely just your kidney. And so they don't see the correlations. So let's say you're getting treatment for a kidney issue. Then, if you actually handle your fear issue, then all of a sudden you find that the treatment to help your kidney is getting better. So anyway, I prepared a list of questions that I've been asked about QHHT, and I'm going to go through and answer those. And because a lot of people are going to be watching this in the replay, probably more than during the live stream. So, in that case, you don't have a chance to send in the question in real time. I will be checking in on the replay and I will be answering questions, and check in a few times in the next few weeks. So I will catch up on questions. So if you are watching the replay, just put your question in the comments and I'm sure I'll get to it. So how does QHHT differ from other past life regression techniques? And I addressed that a little earlier, but one thing is that, like I said, every past life regression technique, every healing technique kind of has the imprint of the founder. And so QHHT has the imprint of Dolores Cannon. Dolores Cannon, through her boundless curiosity and willingness to go wherever the energy, wherever the client went without any censoring, meant that she was willing to bring through a lot of things that other people wouldn't access, or not as much, or maybe they would edit it out of the book. For example, like aliens, maybe like having a past life as a non-physical being, like an angel, having a past life as a planet, as a star, as a galaxy. So past lives can be any form. It's not about the form, it's about the consciousness, and the consciousness can inhabit any form. Obviously, while it's inhabiting a certain form, it takes on a different attribute. So how's QHHT different? Now, I'm not an expert on the other methods. I've read the books of the authors, but I haven't had sessions in all these other methods. So, disclosure there. But I think the difference between QHHT is that it's more daring, and it doesn't hold back. I mean, if it's an alien past life, cool. If it's a future life, cool. If your past life was a tree, great, right? I think it's more open to different possibilities than other techniques. Now, one thing I have seen that is a problem sometimes is that I've had clients who come to me and they have gone to another practitioner, maybe QHHT, maybe different. And what they have encountered, and if you are a QHHT practitioner listening to this, I want you to think about this. They've encountered practitioners that kind of freaked out when they went somewhere weird, when they went into an alien past life, or maybe when they were in the death process in a past life and it was traumatic. Okay, it's really important to understand that when somebody is processing a past life, you got to let them process it, and you got to keep your judgment out of it. If you don't believe in aliens and the client goes to a past life as an alien, or if you don't believe in aliens and you go to a past life as an alien, okay, you can think of it as metaphorical. You could think of it, you don't have to believe in aliens, but don't stop the process. Don't say, oh, that's bullshit, there's no aliens, I'm not gonna look at this, right? Try not to do that, because there's no point doing that, right? Go along with the process. I always tell people later on, go ahead and say you made it all up, or you changed it into something. Don't worry about it. But while you're in the hypnosis, and if you are a practitioner, Don't end the session because the client is going through trauma, because you're going to leave them in the trauma. Okay. You bring the issue up and then you run. Okay. That's worse than if they never had a session at all. So, I've had many clients that came to me and they went to somebody less experienced. And then, maybe they're going through a really bad trauma in a past life. They're freaking out. They're really scared. They're crying. They're going through it. And then they had the practitioner just count them. Okay, I'm going to count to 10 and then you're going to wake up and open your eyes. And they count really quick and there's no lead into it. And there's no traditional ending the hypnosis session the way Dolores Cannon taught us to do it. There's none of that. And then they end the session. Uncool. Who was Dolores Cannon? Dolores Cannon was, I don't know her full biography in detail, so I might get something wrong. But she was from the Chicago area, as I remember. And she was married to an Army officer, I believe. But anyway, her husband was in the Army. They were in Texas. And they were kind of playing around with past life regression, helping people stop smoking, lose weight, that kind of thing with hypnosis. And they had a client that all of a sudden, the client spontaneously went into a past life. And they didn't even know about past lives. And her husband was actually doing the hypnosis. So she would transcribe the hypnosis sessions. Her husband would do the hypnosis. And then he got into a really terrible car accident where he was in a wheelchair for 20 years. And Dolores Cannon took a break from all of that. And then she came back and after he died, she started doing hypnosis. And then Dolores worked for MUFON, I know, the Mutual UFO Network. So she started hypnotizing people who had alien contact, abduction, whatever, and help them remember what happened. So as Dolores kept working with different clients, doing past life regression, it's kind of like the universe kept giving her more and more and higher level information. And she lived in Arkansas. Right. She was in Texas when it began, and then she moved to Arkansas later. And when it was hard for her to get her book published, her first book, she just created her own publishing company. In Arkansas, the hotbed of publishing. Interesting. So the next question, what role does the subconscious or higher self play in QHHT? Okay. I like to explain it this way. You are a life. You have other lives, right? But to go to the other lives, you have to go through the thing that has the lives. So the fingers are the lives. The hand is the higher self, the subconscious. It's not subconscious in psychological lingo. It is, that is the word Dolores Cannon started using, and it stuck. Anyway, so here's my point. In a past life regression session, what happens is first you go through past lives. And then we ask to speak to the subconscious. Okay. But the fact is, as soon as we go through to past lives, we're going through the subconscious to get to the other life, right? So the higher self is central to QHHT. The higher self is not just the fun little thing we do at the end after you've seen your past lives. The higher self is your true identity. And QHHT Past Life Regression is an amazing method for connecting you to your true identity, your higher self. It's incredible what happens with this. It's incredible the wisdom of your higher self, your soul, your subconscious, whatever you want to call it. And what happens is you prepare a list of questions for your higher self when you are going to come and do a QHHT session, and we ask those questions. And a lot of times we get a lot of wisdom and physical, mental, emotional healing at the same time. So, is QHHT a spiritual or a scientific practice, or both? Well, I would definitely call it more spiritual than scientific. I mean, you could probably conduct science using it, but that would require methods that I wouldn't know how to set up. Okay. I mean, how do you do a control group? I don't know. But no, it's a spiritual practice. It's a gateway to spirituality, because as soon as you get to your higher self, as soon as you're in hypnosis, you're expanding the levels of your own consciousness, and you're dealing with these different levels. So how does QHHT help clients access past lives? Let's start with this. You already are your higher self. Your higher self knows your past lives, okay? You already are your higher self, and your higher self already knows your past lives. So the real question is, why don't we just remember our past lives? Well, that's kind of the game of forgetting and remembering that we agreed to do when we come to Earth. So, how does QHHT help you access the past lives? Well, sorry about that. Let me turn down my phone. Don't need these alerts happening. How does QHHT help us deal with these? Well, what it does is it puts you in, you go into hypnosis, and not necessarily super deep hypnosis, but you go into hypnosis and you go into the realm where your mind is a little bit more open. And excuse me, your mind is a little bit more open when you go into hypnosis. You are open to perceiving things that you're not normally open to, similar to meditation. And so QHHT helps you access past lives by taking you into hypnosis and then guiding you with hypnosis into the past lives, into the higher self. And it does that straight up. The thing is, there's nothing really resisting you remembering your past lives except you. You are the resistance to yourself. There's nothing stopping you from remembering that you're a soul except your agreement to forget upon incarnating on Earth. It's an agreement you made, but it's an agreement that you can change as well. So feel free to send in follow-up questions to that if that's not enough. Can anybody be regressed using QHHT, or are there certain prerequisites? No prerequisites. Everybody can do it. Now, the only people that would have an issue doing it, or where accommodations might have to be made, might be certain mental like schizophrenics can't really do it. Okay, so if you're schizophrenic, probably don't do it. If you're on some substance that is mind altering, don't do it. I had an 85-year-old woman client call me before her session and say, "Should I smoke a joint before the session?" I said, "No." I thought that was really funny. But anyway, I said, "Go ahead and smoke one afterwards." But no. Like, some people think getting high or doing a microdose of mushrooms or whatever would help. I don't think so. I think it could just be a distraction. But anyway, are there prerequisites? Well, don't be high. Don't be a schizophrenic. Pretty much there's not much else. Okay. Like I like to say, can you imagine being a kid riding your bike? Can you visualize it in any way? Even if it's just little snippets. Can you do that? If you can, then you can do this. Remember, it's just remembering your past lives. And again, part of you, your higher self, your true self, already remembers your past life. So it's just tapping into your true self. What kinds of issues or questions can QHHT address? Anything. Now, one thing that I tell people, when you come to do a session, you prepare a list of questions for your higher self. What I advise people to do is, you can ask whatever you want, okay? But try, excuse me, try to not ask questions that you would ask like a psychic, okay? This isn't like, what's going to happen to me in the future? The way you could ask a question like that is more like, what would be the best energy for me to be in if I want to manifest that in the future? What would be the best energy for me to focus on if I want to avoid a certain outcome in the future? That's a much better question to ask. But basically, you can ask anything. The main issues that people want to know about are their life purpose, what's blocking it, and how can we clear the blockage, right? Everybody has a life purpose, and everybody could be more aligned with that life purpose. And so that's one of the main things about past life regression. Past life regression is not so much about just being curious about past lives, although all of us that believe in past lives are curious about past lives, and that's fine, and that's totally okay. So here's another question. What can a client expect during a typical QHHT session? I would like you to expect nothing. Expectations are one of the things that can actually block you in a QHHT session. So try not to have too many expectations. Sessions are so different that I don't really, I don't want you to expect anything. Like, I can tell you things that to get you ready so you don't kind of sabotage the session because certain things come up, right? Like, I can tell you, you might see traumatic things, but you might not. You might go through the death process in a past life. You might not. You might see people in past lives that are in your life now and see the patterns, but that definitely doesn't happen every time. You might not even see past lives. You might see future lives. You might see really important moments of your own childhood that need to be cleared before you go deeply into past lives. How long does a session usually last? With me, 4 to 5 hours. And there have been sessions that went far longer. And probably the shortest session I've ever done was maybe around 3.5 hours with somebody who really didn't have a lot to say in the before and after periods. The hypnosis itself is around 2 hours. Generally, there's a 2 hour pre-talk before we go into the hypnosis. And then this goes over, that goes over. I schedule it as a 5 hour session. I try to get it done a little quicker than that, but sometimes it's impossible. What does it feel like to be in the theta state of hypnosis? Well, interestingly enough, so the theta state of hypnosis is when you're really deep, less aware, and have no memory or almost no memory of the session afterwards. That is actually, as people are awakening more and more, they're going into theta less and less. In the beginning, that was a weird thing. It started around 2012, where we were all expecting that everybody would go into theta more than ever because there was an ascension movement. There was the whole Mayan calendar 2012 thing. So a lot of QHHT practitioners were expecting that everybody would go much deeper into theta. The absolute opposite happened, and people started going more into alpha level, which is more waking consciousness. Sometimes in theta, well, the problem with theta is you don't really remember afterwards. Or not nearly as much. But the thing is, when a client is in theta, a lot of times you can't tell the difference as the practitioner. You can't necessarily tell that they're, sometimes you can totally tell. Now, one sign that they're in theta is, for example, if they're a child in a past life, they'll really talk like a child. And if they're in alpha, they might not talk like a child, but they might kind of have some intonation like a child, but they won't really talk like one. So the issue, usually in theta, you're going to just feel really super relaxed, like you were really gone. And sometimes you have no memory of what it felt like. Sometimes you come out of the session in theta and you think the hypnosis hasn't even begun yet. And it's 2 hours later and it's all over. Okay. So, they're mainly, you're not as aware in theta. And to the degree you are aware, it's like you're floating in a void in the background somewhere and you're vaguely aware of this conversation happening or something. What's the difference between imagining and remembering a past life? Nothing. Now, if you mean imagining like making it up, okay, that's a different story. Here's the deal. Remembering requires imagination. If you remember riding your first bicycle that you had when you were a kid, if you remember your first day in kindergarten, if you remember eating dinner last night, you are utilizing imagination. Imagination, this is my view. I don't know if this is the view of the psychological establishment. Okay, it's my view as somebody who's done healing for 26 years, hypnosis for 15. Imagining and remembering are basically the same activity. That's the way I look at it. And the issue with that is when people have that crisis of faith, they say, well, I just feel like I just was imagining everything. I was making it all up. And Dolores once said to me, or the class I was in, like, oh, they all say that, right? The ego doesn't want, on a certain level, to have other lives because those other lives did not include that ego. So the ego's a little territorial in that way. How do you help clients overcome skepticism or fear of getting it wrong during regression? Well, one thing is I say, part of you will always be skeptical. Part of you will never necessarily believe that you had a past life. Part of you will doubt things for sure. That's part of the process of spiritual awakening. Like in religion, they call it a crisis of faith. I'm sure if you ask a priest, preacher, whatever, they would probably tell you, I don't know for sure, but they would probably tell you that anybody that says they've never had a crisis of faith is full of shit, although they probably wouldn't phrase it that way. Crisis of faith is one of the things that's going to happen. And so the feeling that I made it all up, that's the number one blockage. But it's not really a blockage. It's a normal thing. Okay. And what I tell my clients is that in all the regressions that I've received, that I've been hypnotized, I believe in those past lives, but not 100%. My ego cannot really believe my past lives 100%. Even though, like, I know they're true, I know they're real, they make sense in terms of who I am. It makes sense why I saw those past lives rather than others. Okay, so how do I help people overcome skepticism? Number one, it doesn't necessarily have to be overcome fully. Skepticism isn't a horrible thing. Um, you know, when somebody comes to do past life regression, it's healthy to have a little skepticism. It's okay to have a little skepticism. Um, so what I do is I say, you're going to have some skepticism. A part of your ego will never believe in your past lives, perhaps. That's okay. If you expect it, then you're not going to freak out. It's like I have a client going in for surgery, like right now. And shout out to Anonymous. But anyway, if nobody told you that there would be pain involved when you come out of surgery, and you'd just be fixed and it'd be great, and then you come out of surgery feeling a lot of pain, I mean, you might think something's really wrong, right? So, but if you're aware that pain is a natural side effect of coming out of surgery, you're going to freak out a little less. So, I tell people there's a part of your mind that's always going to be skeptical, and it's fine. And I'm not at odds with that part of your brain. Let it be skeptical. Just don't jump down the rabbit hole with it. But let it speak. Don't shut it up. Don't repress it. And let it be there with you. Now, the fear of getting it wrong, I just tell people you can't get it wrong. You can't get it wrong. All you need to do in a hypnosis session is just say the first thing you see. Just say it. Okay. If I say, "What do you see?" Don't pause looking around, figuring it out, trying to formulate your sentence. Just blurt it out. You know, you can say blue, and then I'll have another question. The thing with QHHT and with past life regression in general, hypnosis in general, is I'm going to keep coming with more and more questions. So what you want to do is you want to answer quickly and don't think about it. And answer quickly and don't think about it. And then when you get in the rhythm of doing that, it just comes. And then you're like on track and it just flows. Can clients experience future lives or parallel realities in a session? Absolutely. Clients can see parallel lives, future lives. They can see alternate lives. They can see, a lot of times what I've seen is that the clients will have a kind of mishmash of different lives will all go together, and it's not clear at certain points that we've switched to another life. Because what it's doing is it's showing all the ways that, let's say we have a fear of rejection. Okay. You might see 4 past lives, but just snippets of them that seem to be almost, but they all have this rejection theme in them. It could be you rejecting people, it could be people rejecting you, but it's on the continuum of rejection. And so it can get very non-linear, let me say. Any questions? Please write them in the comments and I will get to them. How many sessions are typically needed for healing or clarity? 1, but that doesn't mean you can't do more. Okay. Now, what happened with Dolores, she would go into this 1 session, deal, right? Because toward the end of her life, Dolores Cannon had I believe, like 10-year waiting list for sessions. And so everybody was only going to get 1. You weren't going to get a second. And, so she would say how only 1 is really needed. Okay, fine. But then when I was doing my level 3 training, Julia said, "You know how many sessions I had with my mom?" I was like, "I don't know." She's like, "Hundreds." Okay. So you could have an endless number of sessions, and they're going to keep having an impact forever. But you don't ever have to have another session after you've had 1. So after you had 1 session, it's totally up to you. Do you want to have more? Cool, do it. Do clients remember everything after the session? No. Now, I'm not saying nobody remembers everything after. Some people feel like they remember everything. Generally, when they listen to the recording afterwards, they realize there's certain things that they didn't remember. And it also depends on the level. If you're in theta, you're not going to remember everything. If you're in alpha, which is totally good enough, then you'll remember a lot of it. And you might remember all of it. But it's kind of like saying, if you see a movie, do you remember the whole movie right after the movie? Well, you think you do, but go watch that movie again, and there's going to be a lot of things that you don't remember from the movie. So nobody really remembers, like, verbatim 2 hours of what just happened, right? Memory doesn't really work that way. What kind of healing or breakthroughs have you witnessed? Okay, here's a funny one. I had a client who, on her list of questions, she said, "Can you please heal my vision so that I do not need glasses or contacts anymore?" Okay. So I asked her higher self, "Can you heal her vision so she doesn't need contacts or glasses?" And her higher self said she never did need contacts or glasses. I'm like, "Well, then why is she wearing them?" And her higher self said, "Well, she looked up to her big sister and she wanted to be like her big sister. And her big sister wore glasses. So she basically psychosomatically messed up her vision, her eyesight, so that she needed glasses. Um, and she'd been wearing glasses since she was a kid. So I said to the higher self, the subconscious, does she need to wear glasses anymore? No, she never did. Okay. So she can stop wearing glasses. Yeah. So when we get done with the session, she has her contacts out, for the session because she's going to be lying there with her eyes closed. And when she gets out, I'm asking her to look out the window. It was in New York City, and to read things and whatever. And her eyes were fine. Her eyes were completely perfect. I go to the bathroom. I come back from the bathroom, and she's putting contacts in her eyes. I'm like, "What are you doing? You don't need contacts now." Okay. Now, I'm not going to trust it. I'm going to be careful. I'm going to check things. But I said, "How about, I didn't have a client right afterwards. So I said, well, how about I'll go outside with you, and, you know, I'll be your seeing eye dog just in case you do need the glasses and this was all wrong." And so we went downstairs, and I asked her to read billboards that were at a distance, and read the clock, and small lettering, big lettering, whatever. I gave her a little vision test. Her vision was perfect. I ran into her maybe 6 months later, and she's wearing glasses. And I'm like, "What the hell?" And she's just like, "I don't know. Like, I didn't wear them for a couple weeks, but then I felt like I needed them again." I was like, "Well, you should come back. I'll give you a discount. We'll fix this up." Never saw her again. Okay. So, she chose that psychological dependency to wearing glasses. And if you're out there and you hear me, and you're the one I'm talking about, give me a call. Let's get you free of the need to wear glasses, since you already are. Okay. So that's one thing that I've seen as a breakthrough. Somebody's vision got perfect after they've been wearing glasses their whole life. Another situation, I had a client with really severe insomnia. This woman, who was a successful professional woman, had gotten insomnia 20 years before I saw her, and she was not able to sleep more than 2 hours per night for the last 20 years. And she put that on her list of questions. Can you heal my insomnia? Now, this was a very, let's say, high frequency, creative, smart woman. And for 20 years, she adapted to, she never slept more than 2 hours per night. And it wasn't ever a 2 hour stretch. It was like she'd get maximum maybe like 45 minutes in one stretch. Then she'd be awake for hours. And then she might get a half an hour, and then she might get 10 minutes, whatever. And the woman was chronically sleep deprived, but she'd kind of adapted to it. It wasn't really messing up her life too much. Anyway, in this session, I asked her higher self, can you please fix this insomnia issue? I don't remember what the underlying issue was. From what I remember, it was more like her higher self's like, oh yeah, we just got to adjust some knobs here. We got to just change the settings. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Now she's good. So when I talked to my client the next day, she was very pleased with the results. She went home after the session and she slept for 12 hours uninterrupted. And after that, she slept very normally, like 8 hours a night, every night. And we did another session within a year after the first one. And her insomnia never came back. A lot of what I work on is more on the emotional level than the physical level. So, I mean, I've had a lot of people with a lot of other smaller physical issues that definitely got healed, but I had one person who had a lot of guilt that had no explanation and a lot of fear. And it revolved around sexuality. And that person went into 2 past lives where molestation had occurred. And my client had been the victim of molestation. In the second situation, was also killed by the offender. And my client had an emotional reaction. There were tears. And then this guilt, fear matrix that my client had been living in for years, when he came out of the session, it was just gone. It was just like the bubble popped. There's a lot of things around feelings of inadequacy that I see huge shifts on. Feeling not good enough. I see huge transformations in people with anxiety. I see huge transformations in people learning self-love. So there's a lot of breakthroughs. The ones that I focus on more, I mean, whatever my clients bring to me is what I focus on. But what I seem to attract in clients is more around the emotional level and blockages in terms of manifestation. A lot of anxiety gets much better. So back to healing, how does QHHT facilitate physical healing in the body? And the answer is the higher self does all the work. I don't do the healing. The higher self does the healing. The subconscious, as Dolores would have called it. Is it possible to heal emotional trauma through past life regression? More than anything in my book, emotional trauma to me is the thing that, and it might just be because that's my area, but emotional trauma depends on you not remembering that you're a soul, first of all. So to the degree that you start remembering that you're actually a soul, I promise your soul doesn't have emotional trauma. Emotional trauma is a characteristic of your ego more than your soul. Yeah. So Melissa says, when I went under for my throat issues, I went to the Salem trials where I was hanged and not speaking my truth and following me in this lifetime. So, right. A lot of times our emotional trauma does come from a traumatic event in a past life. Good luck finding that in traditional therapy where it's only going to go to your childhood and not before. I had one client who now was being burnt as a witch in the past life. Okay. And it was really hilarious. As she gets to this thing of being burnt as a witch, she opens her eyes, she sits up, she's like, that's bullshit. How typical, burn as a witch. And I was like, close your eyes, please, lie down. Okay. Today, you are doing past life regression. Compared to average Muggle Matrix society, you're weird. You're doing something very weird. You're doing past life regression. Anybody who's doing past life regression now is probably somebody who got punished on some level. Excuse me, like being burnt as a witch. If you're doing past life regression, if you're studying UFOs, if you're chanting, if you're doing ayahuasca, if you're studying Buddhism, whatever, in the Western world, you're probably one of those millions of souls who at one point or another in their karmic past was burnt as a witch or dispatched with by other means than burning. Okay. You should assume if you're doing past life regression that you probably have a past life burned as a witch. And for a lot of those people, their life purpose involves dropping the trauma from being burned as a witch, dropping the trauma from speaking your truth about spiritual things, and taking the next step in your spiritual path, on your spiritual path. And the thing is, this is part of your evolutionary process right now. And so this is something that really needs to be healed. The trauma that most of us who are on a spiritual awakening path, we have been punished in past lives. And we've probably done bad things in other past lives, okay? But the thing is, these things need to be healed for us to get to whatever our next level is. So, yeah, speaking your truth is huge because, I mean, there used to be blasphemy laws. You could be killed, you could be drowned, you could be burned at the stake, whatever, just for saying the wrong thing. I mean, it's kind of like, I don't know if you know, in the Amish religion, they're only allowed to read, from my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, but the Amish are only allowed to read the Amish Bible, which is in an older version of German. It's like German from the 1800s, whatever. But the Amish people are slowly forgetting their German. You know, Pennsylvania Dutch is not Dutch, it's German. Okay, Deutsch. And so the Amish people can be excommunicated for reading the Bible in English or for going to Bible study classes outside of the Amish religion. People are being punished plenty for breaking religious rules today in many parts of the world, even in America and Europe within certain communities. So yeah, a lot of our trauma is around spirituality and creativity. We may have been punished for whatever we were creating. You know, there were a lot of rules around art, music, whatever. And anybody who was more groundbreaking, they broke those rules, and many of them were punished. And so, for a lot of people, in order to take the next step in your own personal spiritual evolution, you have to clear those traumas. Okay. What else do we have here? What happens when someone regresses to a non-human or off-planet life? First of all, they're like, what the hell is this? That's the first thing that happens a lot of times. Like, I have 3 fingers. I'm like, do you have a thumb too? Nope, just 3 fingers. Okay. Are they long or short? Really long, right? I remember seeing a past life, and the practitioner said, look down at your feet, which is a pretty standard thing. I looked down at my feet, and it was like 3 things, you know, 3 toes, like a chicken. But I wasn't a chicken. I was more like, you know, some kind of alien. And the first thing that you say is, what the hell is this? And where is this? What is this? I find it quite exciting. I like it. Some people, you know, takes a little bit more to process. So what happens, first of all, when you see a non-human or off-planet life? Well, let me tell you this part. I've done over 2,000 regressions since I started this. And what I would recommend is, if you think you have something like that, work with somebody who's done a lot of sessions, a lot of QHHT sessions, ideally, because I know that anybody who's done more than like 500 QHHT sessions, they definitely have seen plenty of non-human and off-planet lifetimes. Just, it's going to be part of the deal for pretty much anybody doing QHHT. I don't know about other methods. So what I'm saying is, it's really important when you see a non-human or off-planet alien past life, it's really important who you're working with and what questions they are asking you. That is crucial, because like somebody like me, who I've been studying all this stuff since before many of my clients were even born. You know, I've been studying this stuff since the 70s. I've read hundreds of books about spirituality, about aliens, about past lives, about astrology, whatever, channeling. And one of the things, I have clients who are channelers who hire me just to ask them questions in channeling so they can access other things that they wouldn't normally access, because that's one of my strong suits, the questions that I ask. So it's really important to work with somebody who's not stumped when you get to a non-human past life, and that goes a little deeper. So what I like to do is really bring the client into the subjective experience of being that thing in the past life. I like um, I like saying, what's it like being a tree? So as a tree, can you hear what's happening around? Can you see? Like, how does it work? Are you stuck in the tree the whole lifetime as a tree? Like, what's that like? I always imagine, like, if you were a tree, that would be a little confining. You'd just be stuck in a tree and you can't go anywhere. But actually, when I've had clients go into a past life as a tree, they're the soul in the tree, but they're not stuck in the tree the way we feel stuck in the body, which we're not either, but another story. But so what I've been told more than once is that the soul of a tree can travel around and kind of the way we would do astral projection or whatever, but they do it easily. They're not stuck in the tree. It's kind of their home base. But as a soul, they can go everywhere, just like your soul actually can do. Can QHHT help people stuck in life patterns or karmic loops? Absolutely. Or a rock, life is very slow. Yeah, totally. But they're not stuck in the rock either. And I've asked that too. I've asked, like, so do you have to wait till the rock totally erodes or something before you get released? It's like, no. You just go in there for a while, maybe for thousands of years, but it's very grounding, relaxing. It's like a real soothing nap, So can QHHT help people stuck in life patterns or karmic loops? Absolutely. It's kind of what this is for. When you see the pattern that you haven't previously been aware of, to a certain degree, depending on you, depending on the pattern, it breaks the pattern. It breaks the pattern kind of like right away. Now, we are very good at creating patterns, reconstructing patterns, reinforcing patterns. But, think of it like when somebody does therapy, traditional therapy, and then the therapist asks them a certain question. And then all of a sudden, the dam breaks and they're crying and, the synapses connect and the whole thing releases. Okay. And then you realize, oh, now I realize that when my dad yelled at me, I thought I wasn't good enough and I thought he hated me and I could never, live up to his standards or whatever. Now I realize he just was worried I was going to be a loser, whatever. And then there are tears and then there's a shift. Well, that's what happens with QHHT, with past lives, except it's even deeper. because the pattern is through multiple lives, and it would have been really hard to see the pattern otherwise without doing past life regression. So yes, when you see the pattern to a certain degree, it breaks. And then when we deal with the after the past lives, and I'm speaking to the subconscious higher self, I ask it to break the pattern even more and to bring more information and awareness. So yeah, QHHT definitely helps people stuck in life patterns or karmic loops. Absolutely. How do you communicate with the subconscious during the session? Subconscious also being higher self. How do I communicate with it? Just talk to it. No big deal. You are your higher self. You already are it. That's the thing you got to keep remembering. It's part of your consciousness. It's not some far away thing that you got to go on a big mythical quest to find. It's who you really are deep down. So, yeah. How do you speak to the higher self, the subconscious? Just speak to it. Just normal. Just, hey, how you doing today? Right? No biggie. What kind of questions can you ask your subconscious? Number one, life purpose. Number two, what's blocking the life purpose that I'm not understanding this blockage pattern? Number three, what talents do I have that I'm not fully aware of? What potentials do I have that I'm not fully aware of? Number four, why am I blocking these talents? Why am I blocking my life purpose? What is an emotion that I'm avoiding that's keeping me stuck? What you don't want to ask the subconscious / higher self is, who was I in a past life? Okay, we will have already done that by that time. It will have already showed you what you needed to see. Can the subconscious refuse to answer a question or offer healing? Yes. Sometimes the higher self is like, we cannot answer this at this time. Okay, it's frustrating. It's a bummer. I get it. But yeah, that happens. Sometimes the higher self says, we can't do any healing on that. Now, I don't usually take no for an answer, and I keep trying to come at it from different angles, but sometimes it's like, nope, sorry, too bad. The higher self is all about your evolution. It's not about you having a great hypnosis session or finding out all the answers that you wanted to find out. If it would be detrimental for you to have the answer, your higher self's not going to let you get the answer. The end. That's just how it works. Okay. A couple more questions before we end it all today. Okay. What's the most surprising thing you've heard from a client's subconscious? Yeah, Melissa, I can do a version that's remote. Now QHHT doesn't like it. And Dolores had a thing about if somebody does a remote session, that's not QHHT. I beg to differ. Number one, because people are going less into the theta state. And so people are more aware these days. So anyway, Melissa, yeah, I can do a remote session. It's slightly changed, but I can do it. Get in touch with me, Andy Sway at yahoo.com. We can set it up, or go to my website, andysway.com. Anyway, what's the most surprising thing I've heard from a client's subconscious? I have had people who I never met, first time clients, have their subconscious do readings on me. Tell me things from my past. Tell me things about my purpose and so forth. And that's been really interesting. So one thing that I've had many, many times, I'll ask somebody's subconscious, did you have any role of sending this client to me? And the subconscious will say, yeah, I've been trying to get this person to contact you for the last 5 years, and they wouldn't listen. I've been showing them every way I could. I'm like, why me? You know, well, you do good work, whatever. We've been watching you. Excuse me again. But I had one client's higher self tell me something about my childhood that I did not know. And I won't go into detail, but it answers some questions. The wisdom that comes out of a person's higher self is kind of godlike. I mean, it is amazing information sometimes that comes from there. So how has my work with QHHT changed my own spiritual beliefs? The main way that working with QHHT has changed my spiritual beliefs is by turning it from a belief to a knowing. It's not that it's completely new spiritual beliefs. It's not that my spiritual beliefs have totally changed. It's that things that I believed or I tended to believe now, I feel like I know. And the main thing is that it's changed the belief in an afterlife to the embodied knowing that there is an afterlife, that there is really no death. And to me, that's about one of the most core spiritual transformations that could ever happen to a person is when you realize it's one thing to believe in the soul, the afterlife, reincarnation, whatever. That's all very nice. But when you know it, when you really know it beyond a shadow of a doubt, that's a whole other thing. I had 2 experiences where I was in a position where I could be dead within seconds. I won't go into detail, but let's say one was medical and one was where I was the victim of a crime. And in both of those situations, I literally could have been dead 1 second later, easily. And I found myself barely having any fear at all. I won't say 0, I say about 5% of what I would normally expect to have. There was no freaking out. There was thoughts about, well, that'll be a bummer for my kids or whatever. I'd hate to see that happen for them. Not really a fear for me. beyond just the body being a little activated, so what QHHT has done to change my spiritual beliefs is made them very real. Not so mental and belief oriented, but experiential and just like a solid feeling of, that's just what it is. So, that is the main thing that has shifted. Like, I know there's an afterlife. I know you don't die. I had over 2,000 clients that had very different past life experiences, but there's such a commonality in how it all works that that reaffirms the reality of it. Okay, if anybody has more questions, hurry, because I'm not going to be here for long. So this is final warning time. I'll go through a couple more. What are some of the most profound past life stories you've encountered? I think I did a video on this one, but let me tell you really quickly. For those of you in America, you know, vaguely at least, the story of the Lone Ranger and his trusty sidekick Tonto, right? Well, basically, I had Tonto. So what happened was I had this client who went into a past life. It was a woman, and she was a Native American man and a hunter for the tribe, who ended up meeting this white guy who was a trapper, started trapping with this guy, and then ended up being a bounty hunter. And they became legendary as a duo of bounty hunters in the Wild West. Then they moved to San Francisco and start helping the Chinese community. And so I'm going through the whole session, and there's no indication of any Lone Ranger Tonto. It's just a white guy and a Native American guy, and they were bounty hunters, and now they're in San Francisco. This is not the Lone Ranger story I heard. But anyway, what happens is a writer comes to town, and back in the day, back when the Wild West was still happening, there was a big boom on the East Coast of stories about the Wild West. Like, while it was still happening, it was a fad. So writers would come from the East Coast to get stories. So anyway, this writer approaches this native guy and says, "Hey, I heard you were a bounty hunter. You have a bunch of stories. Could you tell me some stories?" And he says, "Look, I'm not much for telling stories, but why don't you ask my buddy here, Steve?" And so, what he said is that Steve, who would have been the Lone Ranger, just started telling him a bunch of bullshit stories. And he said it was funny because he could have told him real stories, and that would have been awesome, but he didn't. He just made up stories, and just winding the guy up. And so then, anyway, at one point, Steve dies, and the Native American's very upset about this. It's very crushing. And then when the Native American dies, he goes into the afterlife, and he meets up with Steve, and Steve's like, "Hey, Tonto." And he's like, "What are you calling me? Tonto? What the hell's that?" And he's like, "Oh, we're famous now. I'm the Lone Ranger and you're Tonto." And the thing is, my client was not American. And I don't think where my client was from that the Lone Ranger story is a big deal. I mean, it's probably there too. I don't know. But anyway, that was a wild one. I've had many people go into future lives that were really trippy. Absolutely. And that's been very interesting. A lot of visions of a future that, although there are many bumps in the road on the way there, the future from my clients' descriptions of their future lives, future sounds pretty cool on a lot of levels on Earth. Have you noticed any patterns in what souls are learning across lifetimes? Here's the number one pattern: dropping fear. Dropping fear. Having fear and dropping fear. That's the big pattern. And that, in a way, sums up all spirituality. Think of it as that love is the master positive emotion and fear is the master negative emotion. We come from the spirit realm of pure love into a realm where fear and separation are possibilities. And our job is to find our way home. And finding our way home involves dropping the fear and finding the love in this realm, despite all the difficulties. And there are many. And Dolores Cannon used to always say, to have a life on earth, you have to be a master manifester. That this is a graduate school for master manifestors, because nowhere else or very few other places in the universe are you this disconnected from knowing who you really are. So if you can find yourself in this realm, then you've done a very masterful thing, because it's a dense realm and it's hard to do that. One more question, unless somebody sends one in real quick. I will answer them if they come in on the chat. Do clients ever encounter guides, angels, or star beings in their sessions? Yes, absolutely. Not only do they encounter guides, angels, or star beings, they encounter themselves as angels, guides, and star beings. Okay, chances are you are on some level one of those types of beings. And chances are 100% that you've encountered them. So yes, the answer is yes. So anyway, to the basics. When I do a past life regression session, QHHT, it's 4 to 5 hours long. It's $400. When you book the session, I require a $200 deposit to hold it, because I'm booking 5 hours of my time and I need a deposit for that. If you need to cancel, you need to give me a day and a half, 36 hours notice, and then we can reschedule or cancel, whatever you want to do. But otherwise, you lose your deposit. So don't make the appointment if you're not sure. Now, obviously, if you were rushed to the emergency room or whatever, I'm not unreasonable. So you make your deposit of $200, and then at the time of the session, you pay off the deposit. You prepare a list of questions for your higher self. I recommend between 5 and 20 questions. Now, I'm always generally going to, 99% of the time, I'm going to have a phone conversation with you before the session, and we're going to go through everything. So nothing's going to be a big surprise, except your past lives. So yeah, the sessions generally, I'm based in Hollywood, California, and I travel to New York on a regular basis. Probably next time I'll be there is early June. And yeah, so the sessions generally begin between 7 and 9 a.m. And then the later sessions usually begin around 3 or 4 in the afternoon. And like I say, they go 4 to 5 hours long. You prepare your list of questions. And the main thing about the questions, besides writing good questions, is please write it on paper. If you're coming to me, you need to write your questions on paper, legibly, so that you can hand me the paper and I don't have to transcribe all the sessions because they were on your phone or something. So please. Anyway, you can always write questions in the comments after the live stream, and I will go back periodically and review and see if there are any new ones. And I will be doing this again in the future. So thanks for being here. I really appreciate it. Have a great rest of the week, and maybe I'll see you sometime soon in a session one-to-one. Thank you, Melissa. Thank you. All right. Bye-bye.